We're going to look at Nebraska and UCLA. My thought, because a lot of people, didn't have high expectations going into Ohio State. Nebraska earned respect. That was well on their way towards earning some goodwill back with Husker Nation after the Indiana game, where obviously there was some goodwill lost, things of that nature. Already covered all that earlier this week. Go back and check it out if you missed it. Nebraska is about a touchdown favorite. Over-under is about 41 points. Well, it's 41 points last time I checked. People expect it to be a lower scoring type game. But the question I have, the bare minimum for Nebraska this year is 6-6. I predicted 8-4 before the season. I gave myself an opportunity to adjust that during the bye week. You remember we were 5-1, getting ready to play Indiana, all that good stuff. I did not. I said 8-4. So it's too late for me to change that. So I am stuck with 8-4. I've stuck with it for months, and now I am stuck with it, and that's okay. But I think most people would say the bare minimum, even coming into this season versus now, is 6-6, and people could live with that. And then we move on to next year and keep building. I think a lot of people would be pretty happy with 7-5. That means we go 2-2 down the stretch. 3 out of 4 would be phenomenal. That'd be 8-4 for all us math majors, wannabe math majors out there. But I look at UCLA, and you look at the last 4 games. You got Iowa, you got UCLA, Wisconsin, USC. USC's probably the most talented football team that we're going to play left out there just as far as athleticism. They're young in the trenches, offensive, defensive lines. But they've got talent. They got a good quarterback, probably the best quarterback we're going to play yet this year. So probably one of the top 2 most difficult teams we'll play. Wisconsin looks a lot better, even in a loss at home versus Penn State. They actually might be better with their backup quarterback and backup running back since they lost the starters at the beginning of the year. Done some really good things. They're 5-3. They're not going to be a pushover. Iowa, man, the forward pass is a challenge for them. Cade McNamara is hurt. And that did not help them improve in their forward pass game. So then you look at them, and UCLA is probably the 2 most beatable teams, knowing that we always play Iowa close, always play Wisconsin close. And I look at UCLA, and that's the game where we're obviously the favorite. We may be the favorite. When we play Iowa, probably a dog versus USC, a dog versus the Badgers. But UCLA is definitely the game where not only are we favored, probably going to be the biggest favorite going into the rest of the year. So the question is, Indiana doesn't go good. Earn some respect. Get some hope back versus Ohio State. But you got to win a game. You got to win a game in here. And UCLA seems to be the most winnable game that we're going to have the rest of the year. Obviously, you can go 4-0, 0-4, or anything in between. So when I think about UCLA, is it a must win? The answer to that is no, because we can easily win and lose to USC. We can easily win and lose to Wisconsin, win and lose to Iowa. Same thing with UCLA. UCLA is not a must win, but it's about as close to thing as you're going to find to a must win outside of an actual must win, which I would liken to bowl game is on the line last game of the year, or you're in a college football actual playoff game or a conference championship game. To me, it's right next to it, because the amount of confidence and momentum after the way we bounced back versus Ohio State and our performance, didn't get the win on the scoreboard, but the performance after the way we bounced back versus the atrocity that was known as the Indiana game. You go out and you beat UCLA, you're going into a bye week, you're bowl eligible, you got that monkey off your back, you can get fresh, you can get healthy, you're heading out to USC. I'm predicting right now that USC game is going to be one of the most entertaining games of the year. I've felt like that since last summer. As that gets closer, I'll talk more about it. Part of it is just who UCLA is. Every game they play is close and down to the wire. Some of them are low scoring, some of them are higher scoring. They've actually been one of the more entertaining teams if you just take entertainment value, as a main piece of watching college football. They're one of the most entertaining teams to watch this year if you watch them week in and week out. All right, their games are always close, whether they win, whether they lose. Penn State, Minnesota, Maryland, all those games were close, down to the wire. Some of the more recent games I'm alluding to right there. UCLA is not a must-win, but if you win that, I think you've now bounced back. You're now bowl eligible. The monkey is off your back. You're going into a bye. You've got some momentum. You're feeling good. You go into the last 3 games where you've got a chance to win each and every single game. Favored probably in at least one of them, probably Iowa, maybe more depending on how some of these games shake out the next couple of weekends before we play USC. If you lose, you're now 5-4. You're going to start to hear, oh, you were 5-3 and all you had to do was win one game, then you lost out. You know, hear that phrase very often. All 4 games the rest of the year, didn't go to a bowl game. Oh my gosh. Now everything's still on the table. Okay, if you lose to UCLA, but the perception is a lot of that goodwill that will have been kind of earned back versus Ohio State, I believe would be gone again, because the perception is UCLA is by far the worst team we're going to play the rest of this year. They're not. They're 2-5, but trust me, they're not. All right. This is a team that's, I remember talking about them on a Big Ten show that used to air here on the ticket that I was doing. Pardon me, ladies and gentlemen. I walked away to do the ticket in the Chronicles from that Big Ten show, but we did a UCLA preview. I remember looking at their schedule, and this is when I thought Indiana was going to be a typical not-so-great 3-9 Indiana team. They played Indiana, undefeated number 13, LSU, who was just number 8 in the country, Oregon, number 1, undefeated, number 3, Penn State, undefeated. They had to go to, actually, they played Minnesota at home and lost on the last play of the game, 4th and 1. PJ Fleck, he rode that boat. They went for it, and the Gophers won the game. All right, then they had to go out to Piscataway. What a freaking flight and time zone change. Pacific time to East Coast. Ladies, you're talking like a 5-hour flight from LA to Piscataway, New Jersey. Come away with a field goal win. So they've been flying all over the place, playing a lot of good teams. UCLA is much better than 2-5. They've only played one team this year with a losing record out of 7. Of their 7 opponents, 6 of them are Power 4 teams. 3 of them are still undefeated. 4 of them were in the top 12 at one point. 3 of them are still in the top 13. 2 are in the top 3. This is not a UCLA team that's going to wow you. Their pass defense, pretty bad. They don't run the ball well. Here's the deal. When you look at UCLA a little bit more in depth, I expect UCLA to get yards through the air against Nebraska a little bit, simply because they're going to be rested. They're off their bye. That has been the one thing that Nebraska's had issues with from time to time, on their defense. Ethan Garbers decimated, and Rutgers isn't great, but they decimated Rutgers in the Bruins' last game, their win, completed 32 of 38 for 383 yards and 4 touchdowns. He hadn't had a great season to that point. That literally doubled his season touchdown total all in one game. That was his best outing of the season. Before that game, he was averaging just over 220 yards passing per game and almost 2 interceptions a game. So he's been a little inconsistent, a little up and down. All right, but the pass defense at UCLA has got to be, like, they're the worst in the Big Ten. UCLA passing defense may just be what the doctor ordered for Huskers offense looking to get going. UCLA has faced the most, listen to this, the most pass attempts of any team in the Big Ten. They've also allowed the most passing yards, the highest completion percentage, and the most touchdowns passing. Now, while UCLA does tend to limit explosive plays, they tend to be vulnerable to consistent shorter gains. Well, who loves to throw shorter passes more than Nebraska? Maybe they'll actually play right into our 18 screenplays. Bad joke. I apologize. Raiola should be able to pass, in my opinion, at least 70%, if not more, completion percentage this week, and easily over 200 yards. All right, UCLA, like I mentioned, they're one of the worst teams in the nation running the ball. And I know this all sounds horrible after I just said they're not that bad. A lot of it's based on who they played. And if you watch their actual games, outside of Indiana boat raced them. 42-13, something like that. Okay. It was 42-13 now that I look it up. They boat raced them. Nobody else has just outright boat raced them that's beat them. Okay. Their games are fairly competitive within reason. I mean, to me, you go to Penn State, number 3 team in the country. You're Deshaun Foster's in his first season at UCLA, and you lose by 16, which is 2 possessions, 16. It's not exactly thrilling if you're a UCLA fan, but as someone who's watching that, I'm like, man, it could have been much worse. So UCLA is one of the worst teams in the nation at running the ball. They rank last nationally in both rushing yards and rushing touchdowns per game. By the way, we have the 4th best rushing defense in the Big Ten here at Nebraska. Quarterback Gabers is responsible for their longest run of the season at 49 yards. By the way, Dylan Raiola's 38-yard scramble last week is the 2nd longest rush of the season that Nebraska's had. Emmett Johnson had a 42-yarder versus UTEP. It's tied for the 2nd longest. All right, Emmett has the season long of 42 versus UTEP. All right, their longest run by a running back is just 22 yards. All right, Keegan Jones. Only Kennesaw State, in their first season of FBS football, has a worse rushing rate than the Bruins do. The Black Shirts should have a good day defending the run. All right, Nebraska running back Dante Dowdell played his best conference game against the stout Buckeyes defense last Saturday. Pardon me again. I will say this. The Bruins linebacking core is pretty good, and their defense is better than their offense. Their run defense is the best part of their defense. So I am expecting Dylan Raiola to actually throw the ball pretty well, and if we don't, I'm going to wonder why it's not better. All right, at least consistently. If they don't want to give up the big plays, fine. We don't tend to want to throw the ball downfield consistently, so that might work hand in hand. They don't run the ball great. We're pretty good at stopping the run. They're going to try to pass the ball, which they tend to do better than they run the ball. And so this could be a game where you see more passes than runs, UCLA, Nebraska, as they approach this game. All right. Raiola also had a breakout performance on the ground, adding 31 rush yards. You got to account for the sack minus yardage as well, helping the Huskers break the 100-yard mark for the second time against Big Ten opponents. UCLA has a good run defense, like I mentioned, that ranks 33rd in the country. All right. UCLA, I do believe, is better than their 2-5 record would appear. They have played 4 teams. I already mentioned a lot of this. I'm looking at my notes again. Seriously, trying to read. I'm looking at my computer screen at least, trying to read through these sunglasses. Got to stick with the bit, though. Got to tough it out. Taking one for the team here. So my final thoughts, it's not a must-win, but it's like right next to a must-win. It's right next to a must-win, Nebraska over UCLA, because of the perception, because of the momentum, because of the goodwill that would once again be lost if you lose this game. It's the team, the perception is reality, if we're being honest. All right, reality is not reality in today's day and age. Topic for a whole nother day. But perception is reality. The perception is this is a game we should win at home, need to win, get bowl eligible. If you do it, bam, don't care if it's by 1 point or a billion. If you lose by 1 point, don't lose by a billion. You're going to lose a lot of that goodwill, that momentum, that hope that you've built by playing well against the Buckeyes. So I do think Nebraska will win this game. I do think it's going to be closer than Husker fans would like, including me. I do think it's going to be relatively ugly because that's how UCLA plays. And Nebraska is inconsistent in certain areas of the team, offense, special teams, and even the defense at times. Okay, they're the most consistent unit on this team. But as long as Nebraska wins, I don't care about anything else, honestly.